Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Nicole here at Pixel Maven's Retreat, and today we're going to dive deeper into the new scrapbook.com stencils. I showed you a little preview of these in the review of the stencils themselves, but I wanted to show you exactly how I created all the different techniques for each project, and today we'll be starting with the tree stencil. So this one has 3 different techniques that I use to create this really cool background, and it's really not all that hard, so we'll just go ahead and get started and you can see how easy and fun this is. Alright, so we're actually going to dive right into the stenciling because it's a 3-part process, but you'll see that it's really easy, and then we're just going to apply a sentiment that I heat embossed with some black. And I'll show you a little trick about that, and really that will conclude this card. It is really quite fun and simple. So I went for some different colors. I picked out Mowed Lawn Distress ink and Picked Raspberry Distress ink because they work really well with water. And I have my stencil and a piece of Nina's Solar White. This is one of the pre-made card fronts from scrapbook.com. And I cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4 because that will be the panel's finished size. So I'm just taping it onto the back of the stencil. So that way I can get stenciling everywhere and I don't have to worry about tape marks. So that is set up pretty nice. And I'm using the scrapbook.com stencil brushes because it will allow me to control how much ink I'm putting on and where I want to have it darker. They really are the ultimate in control because the ink goes on super light to begin with these. You can load them up pretty good and you still end up with a really light touch. So for someone like me who tends to have a heavy hand when it comes to blending ink, these are the perfect way to make sure that I don't get too much ink onto my blends when I'm starting. So the other thing that I have to be aware of though is that I am brushing basically in one direction, so I need to make sure that I come back the other direction to get the full stencil image. And you can really see that where there's some white peeking out, and I can just kind of get in there with the stencil brush. And then I can grab some and make certain areas darker if I want and keep other areas light. But this is really the basics of stenciling, right? You've got a stencil brush, you have a stencil, you have some paper, you have some ink. This is pretty much what we all know as stenciling. So once I have that done, I can go ahead and lift this off, and you'll see that I have my beautiful trees on here and I'm ready for the next step. Alright, so for the next step I'm going to use Picked Raspberry, and I have my stencil not attached to the cardstock because I'm going to be spraying it with a little bit of water and then smushing it down over the top. So the key here is to align it first so that way you know which direction you have the stencil going, because if I flip this over it actually doesn't line up. So I want to make sure that I can reline everything up. So I've got it down here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and flip that over and move this out of the way for a second. And just take this Picked Raspberry and just put a little bit on here. Not going too crazy with it. That's pretty good. It's a pretty strong color. So now that I have that, I'm just going to wipe that up. Now I can put my card piece back down. And this is regular cardstock. It's not watercolor card, so it is going to curl a little bit and it's going to react differently to the water. It's going to bubble and pill, and that's okay. So this was the look that I was really going for. I wanted to have kind of a watery look. And I just really love the way that that turned out, that speckle and everything. It's very organic. It kind of mimics these little snowflake dots here. I really like the way that looked. So I'm doing this on purpose. So I'm just going to go ahead and spritz this, and you can see that it starts to bubble up on here. And you can see that I haven't put a lot of water on here to begin with, which will keep it from spreading too much when I put this over top. So carefully I will go ahead and realign this and just smush it down and lift it up. And there we go. So every time you do this, it's going to look a little different. This time I have a little more than in my sample, but I really love the way that this looks. So I'll clean this up and then we'll move on to the third part of this process. All right, so my piece of card is dry and I have it realigned with the stencil and I have it taped back down again because now I'm just going to go ahead and add some embossing paste over the top in a few select areas. So I know that my sentiment is going to go across the bottom here, so I'm going to avoid this area and I'm just going to do some embossing paste up here. So I don't need a whole lot. Just grab maybe even just that little bit will be enough. And I can just go ahead and put that right over. Now I want this to be pretty thin because I want it to grab some of the color from the trees. And even go so far as to stick the little edge in here so that way it does pull some of it up. And it looked kind of like snow-covered trees. All right, so that's pretty good. So I always keep a little piece of cling wrap over my bottle here. Keeps it nice and fresh. Now that that is done, pop that off. And now I have just some really cute looking trees with some snow looking material on them. And that is going to go ahead and finish up this panel. So the next thing we need to do is make sure this is all dry and then go ahead and stamp and emboss. Alright, so now it is time to stamp our sentiment and emboss, and I thought it would be nice to do a thank you card instead of a Christmas card because basically at this point all of my Christmas cards are done. And I'm using a sentiment from the Sentiments for Everyday stamp set from scrapbook.com. So I'm just going to pop this thank you down here. And get it all lined up. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to just add one more little magnet at the bottom here. That'll do. And I'm going to show you how you can emboss using a color. So I have the hybrid black and I have the clear ink here, the embossing ink. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that I get a good impression, and sometimes you can't see that with just the embossing ink. So I've just inked this up with the embossing ink and now I'm putting the hybrid ink over it, and it will keep the embossing ink properties because it's still on the stamp. So this is going to be like a sticky hybrid ink. But I'm going to see where the stamp ended up. And then I'll still be able to put this in my embossing powder and not have any problems. So let's see how this turns out. See? Perfect coverage. Alright, so beautiful glossy finish on that sentiment. And now all I have to do is add some adhesive on the back and put it on a card base that I already have prepared with a piece of sage leaf cardstock from Lawn Fawn. So just pop this guy on here. And this beautiful wintry thank you is all ready to pop in the mail. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the new scrapbook.com stencils and that it inspires you to go out and get a few and try some fun techniques with this very versatile product. I'll be back soon with more videos and more spotlights into these great stencils. But until next time, happy crafting.